me go ahead and start. Okay. Thank you guys for joining. If you are able to, please put, it doesn't need to be to everyone, but to me directly, your name in the chat. If you have a partner or there's two of you present or attending, if you can put both of your names, that way for your certificate, I can log who was here in for attendance purposes. My name is Heidi Story. I work with JFS, a foster care and adoption agency here in central Pennsylvania. And I'm really grateful to our presenters tonight. We have Shelly Candy from CCC, and she is the community engagement manager with them. And we also have Hannah Sage, who is a subsidy specialist, and they are going to be talking us through how to access and apply for funding for children and youth in foster care for both camp and childcare services for families and for caseworkers to have that information. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end. And since we're such a large group tonight, if you can send me via chat any questions that you have, I'll present those to Hannah and Shelly at the end. And if there's, questions that you have that have already been answered, then I'll be able to kind of filter through those. Okay, Shelly, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Heidi. Good evening, everyone. As Heidi said, I'm Shelly Candy, and I'm from Community Connections for Children. And we are the Early Learning Resource Center for 7 counties in central Pennsylvania. So let me just get started here. I'm going to share my screen and allow you to see the presentation. All right, so hopefully you can see that. Community Connections for Children. We used to be called Childcare Consultants. About a year ago, our name changed. And as I said, we are the Early Learning Resource Center, or ELRC. And what is the ELRC, you're asking? So the ELRCs are a single point of contact for families, early learning service providers, and communities to gain information and access services to support high-quality childcare and early learning programs. Through the administration of both Childcare Works and the Keystone Stars program, ELRCs create an environment for enhanced resource and referral system for communities seeking early learning services and support. And Community Connections for Children was founded in 1987 as Childcare Consultants, and we are a nonprofit childcare resource and referral agency. As the ELRC, we serve 2 regions, Region 9 and Region 10, which Region 9 is Cumberland, Dauphin, Perry, and Lebanon counties, and Region 10 is York, Lancaster, and Adams counties. Just a little bit about our mission and vision. Community Connections for Children ensures that all families have access to high-quality, affordable childcare choices that lead to success in school and life. And our vision is to see a thriving and growing community where all families are able to access high-quality, affordable early childhood education, where children embrace a culture of learning, stay in school, and excel, and where businesses are able to recruit and retain educated employees. This is some of the things that we offer. We offer Keystone Stars, which is the quality rating system for families, groups, and center childcare programs in regions. Actually, we do Region 8, which is north of us up through Center County, and we do 9 and 10. We do the Childcare Works, or CCW. A lot of people used to think of that, at least in Dauphin County, as Childcare Network. So they are synonymous, but it is no longer called Childcare Network. It is now called Childcare Works, or CCW. The Child and Adult Care Food Program. We are a sponsoring agency that works with home-based providers in 21 counties to help them provide nutritious meals to the children in the child cares that they serve. And that is kind of similar to the school lunch program, for those of you who are familiar with that. We work with home-based providers, assisting persons who are interested in starting their own home-based childcare to become certified with the Department of Human Services and improve the quality of care that they provide. And then we are a resource and referral agency, and we assist families in finding quality childcare, and we have free resources available on a variety of topics. So those are some of the things that we offer. And we're just going to go over them individually. When I get to different ones, I'll have Hannah participate, and she has a good handle on CCW. But first, we'll look at Keystone Stars. And Keystone Stars is an initiative of the Office of Child Development and Early Learning to improve, support, and recognize continuous quality improvement efforts of early learning programs. And there are 4 goals for Keystone Stars. They are to improve the quality of early care and education, to support early care and education providers in meeting their quality improvement goals, to recognize programs for continuous quality improvement and to meet higher quality standards, and to provide families a way to choose quality early care and education programs. So the Keystone Star system has performance standards that provide a foundation for the program. The performance standards are grouped into 4 levels, Star 1 through Star 4, and each level builds on the level below it. And it utilizes the research-based best practices to promote quality early learning environments and provide positive outcomes for children. The standards address staff qualifications, professional development, the early learning program, partnerships with families and communities, and leadership and management. And any child care that is in the state of Pennsylvania that's licensed by the Department of Human Services automatically becomes a Star 1. So the basic standard for Human Services, Department of Human Services regulations is the basis for the whole system. And then, like I said, it does build upon that. Next, we're going to look at Childcare Works, and this is the subsidized program that helps low-income families to pay their childcare fees. The state and federal government funds this program, which is managed by the Early Learning Resource Center, or US, and if you meet the guidelines, the ELRC will pay a part of your childcare costs. This is called the subsidy payment. You will pay a part of that cost, and this is called the family copay. The subsidy payment and family copay go directly to the childcare programs. One thing that's really important to note is that if the childcare does not, or if the childcare subsidy does not pay the full amount of the childcare program, what they charge, the provider may ask you to pay the difference between the subsidy payment and their private charges. So it's really important for parents and families to talk to the child care provider and see what they will cover. Otherwise, there may be additional fees. So talk to them about those policies and procedures. Hannah, I don't know if here's where you want to jump in with some of the eligibility guidelines, or if you want me to do that.
Yeah, no, I can do that. Hi, everybody. My name is Hannah Sage. I'm a subsidy specialist for Community Connections. And something to add is when we were referring previously to the copay, since everybody here is a foster family or works with foster families, it is important to know that all foster families pay a flat $5 fee. And that would be your copay no matter what your income is. So if you are a foster family and you currently have a foster child in the system, you can apply and your copay will be $5. Now, what Shelley was referring to in regards to the provider potentially charging some extra fees. So each provider, I call it almost like an insurance with the doctors. So you go to your doctor's office, you pay your copay of $5. That would be like you paying your provider. We are the insurance company, and not always do we pick up, just like the insurance company, everything that the doctor may have to offer. Sometimes if you have to get like an extra x-ray or extra medical attention, they may have you charge that different amount. And that's what I relay back to my clients, especially, is that difference could look like a $5 difference. It could look like a $70 difference. It all just depends. I do see a lot of families with younger kiddos, having like the diaper fees, the formula fees, things that we don't pick up on specifically. So basic eligibility guidelines, you must live in Pennsylvania. Your children can be up to age 13 on the program and need care while you work. So that's super important. So working or educational program, you must be meeting our work hour requirements, but not the income guidelines. So you must be able to show that you're working either 20 hours total per week or 10 hours of school, 10 hours of work, meeting the 20 hours full of childcare to be able to obtain childcare for your child who is 13 years or younger. If you adopt your foster child, you would then have to meet the income guidelines for your family size, and that's something that you'd be able to talk to your caseworker about when that time comes. Just as I said before, you must be working at least 20 hours a week or 10 hours of work school combination in order to obtain the child care services. You could potentially have a job that will start within 30 days of your application for subsidized childcare to be able to obtain that. A lot of our families do already come in with employment, and that is something to note is if you have a job that is starting within 30 days of your application, you are good to go. However, you cannot come into the program and have no employment lined up or no employment at all, even as foster families. You would have to be able to show that you have that employment for the 20 hours. The child who needs care must be a citizen of the United States or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residency. And you must have proof of identification for each parent or caretaker in the home. So this is super important when it comes to foster care. So we know that we don't get our foster kiddos birth certificates or anything like that to be able to prove it. So a lot of times what happens is we have to take, whether it's your agency or the county has to write a note to our program basically stating Sarah Smith, date of birth 1/1/23, is able to attend child care programs or camp programs or whatever in the state of Pennsylvania. This is super crucial. We have to have it in writing that the child is able to obtain services, since you are not legally the child's guardian that can say, hey, this is what's happening. We have to have the county or your agency able to prove that through a letter. And I do have a sample of that letter if anybody needs to see that in the future. You will need to fill out the application to be able to start our program. And I do have applications I can show samples of as well if you've not seen those or you have questions on those. We would need to have you sign a release of information. And we'd have to have that you have your county worker or your whatever agency you're working with. We would need to be able to share information. It must be listed on the release of information. We do have a difference between foster care versus kinship. So foster care, the child is in the legal custody of Children and Youth Agency. And the agency must maintain custody while we are getting paid as foster parents to provide care for the child. The state then, stands in as the loco parentis to the minor, making all legal decisions while the foster parent is responsible for the day-to-day care, which is different than the kinship when the child is both physically and legally in the custody of a family member. So if a child is in foster care, you have your $5 copay, and we do not take your income into consideration. However, if your child is kinship, we will need to take your income into consideration since you have both physical and legal custody of the child. Foster families, like I said, would need to meet the requirement of working at least 20 hours per week, but do not need to meet the income requirements. Kinship families would need to meet both the income and the hours worked for requirements. Foster families, like I said, do have that automatic $5 per week copay. Even if you are extremely over the income guidelines, it will still stay that $5. payments for the foster care stipends paid to the foster parents is not included in any income guidelines. So we do not have to take that into consideration, and you do not have to show proof of that. And when a wait list is in place, foster families are given priority on that wait list. However, we currently do not have a wait list, and we have not had one probably 3-4 years now. So that's not for Shelley. So we haven't had one in quite some time, which is amazing. But if for some reason we were to get a wait list in the future, then foster families would be given the priority on that wait list. For your
I don't know if
application,
you want to share the applications or whatever, Hannah. I can stop sharing if need be.
sure, absolutely. All right.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I'm from Berks County Children and Youth Services.
If you don't mind, just go ahead and chat me your question and I will
Okay,
raise those to
okay.
Shelley and Hannah at the end. Thanks so much.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can, Hannah.
Okay, so this is what the Pennsylvania application for subsidized childcare is. This can be picked up at any of our offices. It can be mailed, it can be electronically sent, and you can also access it through Compass. Compass is obviously going to look a little different, but this is what our paper application looks like. So the first page is we're just collecting information about you, about where you live, about the primary language spoken in your home, when would be best to call you, and what other benefits or service you might already have. The next page is we're going to be looking at the people in your household. So you would put yourself, your spouse, if you have a spouse, as well as any children in the household, whether you are requesting care for them or not. So if you have one foster child and 3 biological children, you still want to list all 4 children on the application. But down here, when we're looking at the children who need care services, you would just list your foster child. If you do choose to add your other biological children to the case, your income would then be considered as taken a part of the application. So that is something you have to, kind of weigh out if you want to, see if you would qualify for services for all 4 of your children. You can do that. Or most likely, a lot of our foster families will just add their foster child to the case. And then you would list the days that your child needs care. And we do provide care throughout the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, for children who do need that weekend care. Again, your employment verification form would need to show that you need care at that time. It can't just be, hey, I need a break Saturday and Sunday. Your employment would need to say, hey, Sally needs to work on Saturday and Sunday. And then we'd be able to provide funding for those providers who do care on the weekends. Immunization certificate. This is just certifying that your children have their immunizations, and any information about your child, if they're learning a second language, if there's transferring to different school, things like that. As well as if the child has an absent parent, you can then just list that the child is a foster child. The employment, education, and training, you would need to list your employment, your spouse's employment, and if you're in any type of training, in the sense of if you're going to get your master's or if you're getting an associate's or anything like that, you want to list that because you can also get some days and hours covered if you are in training. Again, this is where you would list your other income and expenses. However, we don't take the income into consideration. It is pertinent that we have this information though, so when you do go to adopt, if you do adopt, we will know what information to ask for to make sure that your income is up to date and correct when we assess for your adoption. We do have the option for the voter registration. This is your permission to share. This will be made if you are looking, with the pre-K counts, Head Start, early Head Start. This is just asking for permission. The release of information, this is what we were talking about in regards to adding your agency worker or your county worker so that we can reach out to them if we have any questions or concerns for your child or something within the case. That is super important too. The letter that I'm going to show in just a second, this is super important because I have spent a lot of time on the phone with county workers saying, hey, like you missed this, you missed this. And instead of having the foster parent as the middleman, I would just streamline it and say, hey, you have the release of information. I'm going to call up your county worker, or I'm going to call up your agency worker or whoever, and I'm going to tell them specifically what we need on this case rather than saying, well, we need X, Y, and Z. And you're like, oh my goodness, I told them Y, Z, and X or whatever. This streamlines the process, and it also gives them the opportunity, or anybody the opportunity, to be able to get information on your case or pick up anything on your behalf. So say you need to pick up your redetermination in a year, we can say, okay, so Sally is on here as your pickup person or release of information. We're going to be able to give them the redetermination in, when they come into the office or whatever. So this is super important and has been super helpful for our families. This is the rights and responsibilities. This is something that we would go over in your personal interview. So your personal interview is the second piece to your application. Once you are deemed eligible, you'll get a letter in the mail stating that you are due to set up your personal interview. And that's when you will meet with your caseworker, and you will have a chance to have that one-on-one conversation with them, explain your situation. I've had foster families explain, hey, it took a month to get the application because the application can take up to 30 days to be processed, and my kiddo was moving out next week. And I've had that happen in the past. So we were able to talk that through, say, okay, we'll pay back for the last month, and then we'll suspend services and go forward. It gives us a chance to connect. It gives us a chance to explain the program, go over the rights and responsibilities, and go over some of the information. So once we are done with that personal interview and you've signed your releases and all of your rights and responsibilities, then you would be able to share your daycare provider. I would then, or your caseworker would then, take that provider and put that into the system, and we would go from there. A lot of times our families already come in with kiddos who are in care. So we do back pay to when your first application date is at this time, since we do not have your waiting list. So the application, if you turned it in today and we have our personal interview in a month, we would be able to back pay through January 30th. So that is super helpful. And these are just some extra pages to add any extra kiddos or anything in the future for that. So I'm going to show a sample of what it would look like for you to turn in. This is the document that we need from your agency or your county worker. This letter is basically showing us the date that it is now. It needs to be current. It needs to show the child's name and the child's date of birth, when they were placed, and that they were placed with the foster family. So if this, were to say Sally something, obviously that's not correct. That's not where the kids are placed. So this needs to show that the kids are placed with you. It needs to show the kids' names, their date of birth, and that they are able to be, are eligible for childcare and camp enrollments in conjunction with their foster care status. So that would need to be what is on the letter. A lot of people forget this last little blurb here, which will then cause the case to go back, or they would forget the birth dates or things like that. So this is super important as part of your application. With your application, you will get your application checklist. So this is just stating that you need to sign all of the necessary documents on your application. Your employment verification form, even though we do not take your income into consideration, we do need your schedule, and this is what your employment form would look like. You would have your place of employment, your name, the address of your employment. Your employer would then write your schedule, They would still need to fill out all of your hourly rates and things like that. Because like I said, remember in the future, if this would become adoption, we would need to be able to have all of this information on file. We would then need to make sure that this is signed. And you can also turn in pay stubs to show your hours worked, or this could be sufficient enough for your case. If you are self-employed and you have self-employment forms and income verification, you would still need to be meeting the 20 hours a week and still be able to show that you are making a profit from your self-employment. So you would not be able to say, hey, I started this business and I'm making no money at all. We would still need to be able to see that you are making some sort of money to be eligible under self-employment. And we do have a lot of documents that go along with the self-employment forms. So if that were to come about, we would be able to present that information to you. The family composition for each household. So that would come about if you only are applying for your foster children, then we would only need that placement verification. But if you have other children in the home, then we would also need their birth certificates, even if we are not going ahead and having them enrolled in any of the services. We would still need to have verification of who's in the household. We would also need your address verification, photo ID. If you are in any type of training, we would need to make sure that we have your training information. And then we would also need that placement letter that we had talked about. And that's all I had on that, Shelly. I don't know if you want to go back.
Great. I will go back to the slideshow and just walk you through the Compass website and how to find childcare. So let me go back to sharing.
Shelly, while you're pulling that up, I think it makes sense to just scroll through one or two of the questions that came in about what you already shared and what Hannah shared.
That's fine.
A common question that we're seeing from county agencies is to clarify a little bit further the definition of kinship. So a lot of kinship families are licensed approved foster families where the county has custody of that child. So in that situation, if the county has custody, can you clarify if the family would need to meet the income guidelines?
If the county has custody and they have legal custody of the child, then no, they would still qualify without the income. But if they have both a physical and legal custody of the child in a typical kinship situation, then we would need to have all of their income information.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question that came through, which I think I know the answer to, but I'd still like to hear you speak to it, is what if a foster or adoptive or foster family works from home? How does that change, if anything, their eligibility?
It does not. So their eligibility would still go through since you are able to work from home. You would just have to be able to prove the hours that you are working. So your boss would still have to fill out the employment verification form stating that you are working from home and these are your hours or your anticipated hours. And then you would be able to still qualify for care.
Awesome, thanks. Some of the other questions I think you might be answering in the upcoming segment, so I'll hold off on those.
Great. All right, let me just share from current slide. So let's see. I don't think it shared the way I wanted it to.
We can see it, it's just not in presentation mode.
Yeah, wonder why. All right, well, we'll not worry about that, but not back. This one. All right, so right now, I know someone had asked a question about the waiting list, and you were correct. The waiting list that we were talking about is for funding with the Childcare Works program. So right now, there are actually waiting lists that are pretty significant for childcare because there is a lack of childcare providers out there. So it's really important to be checking with the program to see what their availability is, what their waiting list looks like. And you may need to look at another option for waiting lists and things like that. So that's something you'd work out with the actual provider. That's
And
not something that we have control over.
And I was going to say, to add to that, I have a lot of families who will have 2 or 3 providers, and their number one top provider might not have any type of openings for 6 months. So I always suggest to them maybe using your second or third choice. And then once that opening becomes available, then you would be able to transfer your child to the new provider. So this is a parent choice program. So you can choose to have your child moved multiple times. You can stick with one child care center throughout your program with us, or you could, like I said, have the provider of your choice, and then use a second or third option until your provider is eligible or has openings.
Thanks, Hannah. So this is where you would want to go to help look for childcare providers. And if you go to www.compass.state.pa.us, it will bring you to the Compass website. And once you're at the Compass website, if you go to the tab that says Helpful Links, and in the middle column there, you can actually see it. It says you would go under helpful links and then find home and community-based service providers. And on that screen, it's darkened, like it's the second item down. So you would click on that. And then you can search by an address if you want to look for something close to where you work, or if you want to look for something closer to your home, or if you know a specific child care provider's name, you would enter that. And then it will give you a list of providers. And you can see there the different providers are rated by star level. So they have anywhere, like I said from before, anywhere from 1 to 4 stars. And they're all listed by different providers. And then you can, under each provider, over at the side there, it says more details. If you click on more details, it will give you some of the specifics about that child care provider. It will tell you their hours of operation, the ages of children that they serve, if they have additional fees, discounts, things like that. And then under financial programs accepted, it will tell you if they accept Childcare Works. So that information is all there. If they have any accreditations, working with children with special needs, all of that information is listed under more details. You can also get information about their inspections. So if you click on inspections, it would bring up all the information about their certificates of compliance. Most providers are given a 1-year certificate of compliance. If they have an issue where they did not get a full certificate, you can actually look that up and see what their under the renewals, it says view inspection details in green. You can actually look up the details of their inspection. So you would see if they had any violations, what those violations were, or if they have a completely compliant center. When the annual inspection is done, that information would be there as well. So this gives you a little bit more information about the programs that you're looking at, and where to get that information. So how can the ELRC help? So we help through subsidy funding through the Childcare Works. We are also a resource and referral agency. So if you are looking for childcare, you can, when those applications come in, we can actually provide you with a list of childcare providers from the Compass website. If you don't have time to go on and look for them yourself, we can actually print a list and have them emailed to you or sent to you, whatever you prefer, with our resource and referral staff. We also provide information on developmental milestones, behavioral supports, all of those kinds of things that we can pass on to families. We provide support to providers who are in the Keystone Stars program through educational opportunities and continued movement in the Keystone Stars program to higher star levels. We have contracts with certain businesses to provide enhanced support services for their staff. Like one of those organizations is WellSpan Health, and employees of theirs can actually give us a call and we help them with the actual searching for childcare. So we'll call and see who has availability, things like that. So various businesses have those kinds of contracts, and you could check that with your HR department if they have enhanced resource and referral services with us. We also link businesses through community partners. And that is the part of my job that I do. I do a lot of work with our community partners. I work with school districts, United Ways, actual businesses, helping them to get the supports that they need to be able to help their employees. And then these are ways to contact us. And I will be getting this information to Heidi so that she can pass it along to all of you. It does have our phone numbers for our various offices. We have an office located in Lemoyne at 701 Bosler Avenue, and we have an office in York City at 29 North Duke Street. Our email address is there, and we have a website. And if you want to check out our Facebook or Instagram pages, you would just look under Community Connections for Children. And then that is all that I have. I will stop sharing so we can go from there and talk in person with any of the questions that came up from here on.
Thanks. So one of the questions was about where to apply. So it sounds like we have physical copies of the application in the physical office locations, and then families can apply through the Compass website, which is where you apply for any benefit in Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, awesome. Someone had a question about summer camp. Can you talk about summer camp for school age kids?
Yeah, so we do provide summer care for all of our children. And with the subsidy payments, nothing would change. Even if you have a school age kiddo who's going from part-time to full-time, your copay will still be $5. And we will provide the care for the children over the summer. Most of our camps do participate with us, but I would double check with your camp to make sure that they do accept our funding.
Thanks. Someone else had a question. Oh, go ahead, Shelley.
I was just going to say too, summer camps that are licensed are the ones that are actually part of the Child Care Works program. So if it's a community camp, like I know in my area, our township does a private community camp, that is not licensed, and that is not covered. That is not part of the CCW program. So that's one thing, as you talk to programs, it's really important to check that information.
Thank you for adding that. Someone asked, is this a statewide program or only in central Pennsylvania?
It is a statewide program, and I'm actually, I saw someone had asked about if we serve other areas. We do not serve other counties. We have the ones that we mentioned, but I'm trying to look up the map to be able to provide you a link to the map for other regions. Actually, it's a web page. So let me just copy this and put it into the chat for you. And this gives you the list of all of the counties and where you can look up information for your county.
Thank you. In the meantime, someone asked a question about licensed versus unlicensed programs, and that includes like payments to family members or people who are providing daycare or childcare services in their homes. Can you talk more about the in-home service options?
Yes, so we do provide care for children who are looking to be with relatives. Now, it has to be a direct relative, a child's grandparent, great grandparent, aunt, uncle, or older sibling of 18 years or older that can pass the background check, their fingerprints, their FBI clearances, and they will also need to do a mandated reporter training. Once that is all completed, they would then meet with our provider liaisons, who would then do what we would consider like a personal interview. They would go over how to fill out the attendance forms that you would need to turn in monthly for your payments. And they would go over all of the rules and regulations with you to become a family provider. It does have to be a direct relative. We do not service relative who are like a third cousin or something like that. It has to be a direct relative, and it cannot be a neighbor or a friend any longer.
Hannah, how does that work for children in foster care then? Can it be a relative of the foster family that they're living with, or it has to be a birth relative of the child?
Yes. So with foster care, it can be by blood, court, or marriage. So that would be a court relation.
So just to make sure I'm repeating and hearing you correctly for everyone on this call, if a child's placed in foster care in the home of Sally and Dan Smith, and their mother is available to help care for their foster child, their mother could go through the process to care for that child and receive reimbursement for providing child care services to that child.
As long as they do not live with the family. So if their mother lives 3 blocks down, that's great. But if their mother has in-law quarters within the house, we cannot use that.
Interesting. Okay. Other questions? Another question was about, again, the licensed versus unlicensed programs. If it's untraditional hours on the weekend, or a foster parent's working second shift or overnight, does the provider then again have to be a licensed provider or not?
Yes, they all have to be licensed, whether that is a relative provider. So say if you work over the weekends and you want your mother to watch the child during the weekends, we can go through the relative provider process. Or we do have providers that are licensed to do second, third shift and weekend care. They're going to be the in-home providers that do the care from their households. But we do have that.
Thank you. On the website that Shelley pulled up with where you can search the daycare providers in your area, does that also include the list of licensed summer camps?
Yeah, you can actually click on summer care, school age care, and search for them that way.
Mm-hmm. Does that website also include the in-home providers, or would we have to ask for like a customized list of providers for a certain zip code?
No, you can actually click on what the provider type is that you'd prefer. So if you'd prefer a center, if you prefer a group childcare setting, which is up to 12 children, usually in a home or that kind of thing, or if you want a family provider who has up to 6 children in their home, you can click on those options as well.
Thank you. And I want to highlight that for all the foster families here on the call. If you receive a child placed in your home and you just Google a list of providers in your area, that's not going to be as comprehensive as going on this website and looking for all these other like in-home providers or different things like that. I think there's a lot of other resources out there in that respect.
Would it be helpful if I were to show my screen of the Compass website so that they could see what that looks like?
I think that'd be great. And if anyone else has additional questions, keep them coming.
Can you see my screen?
Nope, not yet.
Now can you see?
Now I can.
Now we can.
Okay, so this is what you're going to come across when you see the Compass website, and I'm just going to use the address to our program, and I'm going to put in the address as well as the children's age. I'm going to say we have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. I'm going to click on advanced search, and you're going to click on childcare. And then up here, you could toggle the different things. So your schedule, you could say, I want a schedule Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for full time. You do have the option for general services are set general schedules that are served. So you have the school district holidays, you have the early dismissal days, before school, after school. Here's the overnight care, evening care, weekend care, sick care, drop-in care. We're just gonna have that as a general. We'll just say that we're gonna start at 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. The environment, a childcare center, a family childcare, or a group childcare, just as Shelley had discussed earlier. You can choose in the environments if you need specifics, such as like a peanut-free or accessibility for persons with disabilities. You can then choose the star rating as well. We want to go all the way up through a star 4. You can go all the way down to change the language. If you have a foster kiddo who speaks Spanish, you could put in that you want a Spanish-speaking provider. Transportation, you do also have the option. So if you were to be in York County School District for Southern York and you want Shrewsbury Elementary, this will also give you directly what providers do provide before and after school care for your child's specific elementary or middle school. And then you also can do the financial programs accepted. We can put Childcare Works because that's who we're working with. The distance could be up to 30 miles or as low as 1 mile, and we'll put just the typical 5 miles, and we can put find providers. And it's going to load a result of different providers in the area specific. Sometimes
You made it too specific, Hannah.
Too specific.
That none of those are within 5 miles of Shrewsbury,
Right.
so.
Yeah, whoops. Okay. Yep. So
change the distance.
I'll just, and we'll change up to like 15, just so we can get a generalized list. So this is 55 results. So these are all the providers within a 15-mile radius of 29 North Duke Street in York, Pennsylvania. It gives you the information on the provider, where they're located, what their address is, and what their star rating is. You can always look at more details. And this is where you can find their service schedule, their schedules that they provide. They do before and after school care, what their costs are, what their additional fees are if they participate with us. They are also associated with York City districts to be escorted to and from school. And they do also participate with the pre-K, PA pre-K counts. You can see their certifications, all of the information, accreditations, things that they have on that specific provider. And then you can obviously give them a call and reach out to see if they have any type of openings. I will say that Compass does not specify whether they do or do not have openings. You do have to reach out to the provider specifically for that.
That's awesome info. Thank you so much, Hannah. A couple more questions. If you switch childcare providers, do you have to reapply for funding?
No. So it is a parent choice program. So if you were to decide that you wanted to go to Sally Joe's provider on Monday, but realize, you know what, it's not really working for my kiddo, Dana Smith has openings at their provider, you would just go ahead and let us know, hey, we'd like to switch over to a new provider, and we'd be able to transfer. The only time that there would be a reapplication with foster children is if your foster child is no longer in your household. Your case would then close. And if you were to get another foster child, even if it's within the same week, you would have to reapply since your other foster case had already closed.
What happens if you have an open case and then an additional child is placed in your home?
Right. So that absolutely would keep your case, that your case would then stay open. We would just need one of those letters that we had looked at earlier, specifying the child's date of birth, the child's name, and that the child is placed with you. We would then add the child to the case, and it would not affect your copay or anything of the like. It would just add the child. We'd be able to do the enrollment whether it's the same provider or a different provider than the child that you already have in service, and it would continue. That's just referring to if your case, if your foster kiddo leaves on a Friday, we close out your case that Friday, and then that next Tuesday you get a call and you have a new case, then we would have you reapply and we would reopen.
Thank you. In terms of the age, is it up to age 13 when they turn 13 or through their 13th year?
So it's age 13 up to your redetermination. A lot of providers do stop services at 13 unless you have a disabled child. At that point, then there would be special accommodations for a child between the age 13 to 19.
And do you cover subsidy for those situations?
Yes, we would need some disability documents, and we would work one-on-one with you guys to get that specific information.
That's wonderful. Colleen has a question that you might not be able to answer, but up in the Northeast are having a lot of trouble finding any daycare availability at all, which ends up resulting in a foster child having to move, or the parents, potentially losing their job because of lack of daycare. Do you have any suggestions, even along the line of like the, in-home provider thing that we talked about, to support that problem?
The best thing that I could suggest is what I suggested earlier, is it may not be your top pick, or it may be a situation where you have to use a relative provider for the time being until there's an opening. But unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that just across the counties, just the lack of childcare providers at this point. So it might be, if you're a new foster parent, or if you are a foster parent in between kiddos, maybe just reaching out to some of the daycares around you and saying, hey, I'm accepting children age 4 to 10. What does your waiting list look like? And maybe start getting on some waiting lists, or start talking and building those relationships with those providers, so that when the time does come that you do get kiddos, it might be a smoother transition.
Thank you. What should a family do if they've had a foster child and have an active case and they adopt the child?
So if they adopt a child, they would need to send us the adoption decree showing that they've adopted a child, and then at which point their caseworker would then look back and refer to their application, as long as it's within the year, and then take their income and add it to the case. At that point, if they are determined ineligible due to being over income, then they would have 2 weeks, a 2-week notice stating, hey, you're now ineligible for care. And then you would have those 2 weeks to figure out how you're going to private pay, or if you want to switch providers or things like that. If you are eligible, then you will get an increase in your copay based on your income and family size. But then your case would continue with no lapse in service.
Can you share a little bit more about the income guidelines? Do they follow poverty guidelines, or in general, what does that look like?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Yes, we do follow the federal poverty income guidelines, as well as the state median income. We do have those specific for each family, and they do also come within the application. I don't have it pulled up, Shelly. I don't know if you have it.
I don't, but I can look for it. Hold on.
Thank you. And again, that's probably like a down the road consideration for folks, but good to keep in mind if they are going to be adopting a child and losing the benefits, they can kind of map out if they might qualify based on income. Jacqueline wants to know, are the rules and guidelines for eligibility different by county, or are those the same across the state?
They're the same across the state. For the most part. There is some variables where some counties may ask for like a social security number, but for the most part, all the generalized information is the same.
Thank you. Is it $5 per child, the copay, or per family?
Per family. So you could have upwards of 6 foster children in care, and it's still going to be a total of $5 that you're paying that provider.
And again, just what you said before, if the provider themselves has other fees or something like that, you might be paying the difference, but what you cover, correct, the family copay is only $5.
And in respect to the providers having less and less spaces, you may have to split your children between 2 different centers. That copay will still only stay on one child. So then your other child would have a $0 copay. and the one daycare would have the $5 copay. So even if you have multiple different providers, there's only going to be one copay for the family, and that is going to go to whichever provider, usually the youngest child, is at, and then that would be where you would pay your copay. Outside of that, all of the other children in the separate centers would have the $0 copay.
And I think I know the answer to this one too, but that's $5 a week, not $5 a day, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thanks. Two questions here relating to the relative provider. Does the relative provider complete a licensing process with you? And is there any documents online or places where we can find like kind of a pathway of application for people who want to do the relative provider?
So for the relative providers, the information typically comes from your caseworker. Typically what you see is when you do your personal interview or even at application, you can say, hey, I'm looking to use my child aunt, and we would like to start the relative provider process. I would say that if you would like to use the relative provider process, you want to do it right away, and you want to start the process as soon as possible, because we do have to go through the fingerprint process and the background checks, and sometimes that can get held up a little bit, and we do only have a 30-day window. Once your application is approved, you have 30 days to find care. Once you do find the care, then we would be good to go. But with a relative provider, it does take quite a bit of time. So you want to get that started as soon as possible.
How?
And in respect,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, in respect to the licensing process, the relative provider licensing process is going to be different than what you would consider like a home provider or a center provider. It's going to be, in a sense, licensed to watch your specific child through our program, but it's not going to be able to say, okay, my aunt got her certification through CCW to watch my child. Now she can watch the neighbor down the street or anything like that. It has to be specific to that child that has applied for care and they have gone through the process for that child.
You mentioned about like contacting your worker to communicate that. How should folks contact a worker if they're just submitting an application through the Compass website?
So at that point, they should reach out to their specific county. So if it's going to be specific, for example, Region 10, they want to reach out to the 29 North Duke Street location and ask to speak with the intake worker. Sometimes that case might have already moved over to a caseworker, and at that point, you can kind of see where your case lands, and then you'd speak to that person. Intake and subsidy work very closely, so they would then relay that information that you've reached out and that you're looking to use a relative provider, and then at that point, we'd be able to start that process, and we would get all that information from you. We do need the relative provider's name, address, email address, phone number, relation to the child, and the hours, days, and times that the child will be watched by that relative provider. Our provider liaison would then get the information, send out a packet specifically to your relative provider, not to you, and they would fill out the information and start the process of their fingerprints and things like that. And as they're filling that out, they would then send that information to the provider liaison, who would almost be what you would consider their caseworker, and then you would still keep us as your caseworker within the subsidy team.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. If a family's using a relative provider, will you back pay for that with those 30 days as well?
With the relative provider, we back pay for when their fingerprint date is. So if their fingerprint date is today, and then you would, finish everything in a month, then yes, we would go back. But if your 30 days are, today and they just got it done on the 22nd, then we would only pay back through the 22nd. It has to go off of their fingerprint date rather than their actual application date.
Makes sense. Someone else asked, how often do you have to reapply for funding, and how often do you have to have that employment verification form filled out by your employer?
Yeah, so that is once a year. That is yearly. It goes by your application date. So if you apply today, then your next time would be 1/30/2025. We would then review your information. You would get a packet in the mail. It's going to come 6 weeks before it's due. It's going to have the employment verification packet. It's going to have your redetermination packet in it. And it's going to have some directions on the first page on how to follow the process. Everything in the packet is already going to be what we have on file for you. So it's going to have your address, your phone number, the names of the kiddos in your home. So what you would do is make sure all of that is still correct. And then you would sign that document, and then you're going to send in your employment verification form. And the one thing with foster families that is different at redetermination is you do also need another letter from the county showing that the children are still in your care. So the same letter that you got at application for your child, you would need to have that at redetermination as well. And it would need to be updated. So like I said at the very beginning, that date at the top is super important because it has to be within 6 weeks that all of that is updated. And then you would send all of that in, including the redetermination packet. And then we would certify you for another year. As long as you have no major changes such as adoption or anything like that, you would just continue to be eligible for the following year with a $5 copay.
And just to clarify something you mentioned before, in terms of verifying that like enrollment in foster care, it doesn't have to necessarily be a county worker. A agency worker for the licensed family could also like type up that information.
Correct.
Someone has a question. What if your employer will not fill out your employment verification form?
So if that happens, then we would have you fill out your employment verification form for yourself. And you would write down your hours and you would sign it, and then you would turn in the paper that states the work number. And then we would be able to communicate. We also can do what's called a collateral contact. So if we have questions or concerns, or we need to verify anything on your employment verification form, we can reach out to your employer and say, hey, we're just doing a verbal collateral contact. We just want to verify that your hours are 7 to 3 for this specific employee, or if we have any questions or concerns there. But for the most part, we would handle it almost like in a self-employment way with your hours.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other questions at this time, but my question to you as both a foster parent and an employee of CCC, what are the other tricks, tidbits, pieces of information that you think it's important for families and workers to know about this process?
I guess my biggest one is to talk to your worker, explain your situation, and see, specifically how they can help you. There's a lot of times that I will sit one-on-one with my clients, sometimes upwards of an hour, and listen to their story, listen to their kiddo's story, and then, something might click and I'm like, oh, wait, like we can fix it by doing blah, 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 because, we had this conversation. But I mean, realistically, that and being super proactive, talking to your providers, searching the Compass website if you have a kiddo or you're getting a kiddo and you're looking for summer care. If you're looking for summer care, you're almost too late. Like people start looking for summer care like Thanksgiving. So that is something to be super proactive on. Don't wait until June and say, oh, I think I want to do summer camp. It's 9 out of 10, they're going to be full at that point. You want to, get that communication with the provider as soon as you can. For my own personal situation, my foster kiddo, I've just now, started working on getting summer camps for her. And, they were even talking like, yeah, we're pushing some deadlines. So reaching out and being proactive is super, super important. And just kind of, feeling out the providers around you, seeing who's, gonna have openings, even if it's a situation where, in 6 months from now, you're going to be fostering, or if you're just in the process, or any of the workers who have kiddos or have foster parents who are going to be getting kiddos in the future, talking to the providers in the area starting now to see who has openings, what they can do about a waiting list, things like that.
Thank you for that. And that does spark one. So two things. So first of all, what I hear you saying is if a family goes and submits all their paperwork through the Compass website, they should not dust their hands off and say, great, I submitted my application. The very next day, they should call in to their local ELRC and say, hey, I submitted this application, want to make sure you received it, wanted to know if I was missing anything, and just like be really proactive with that communication in that 30-day window. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We do have up to 30 days to process the application, but being proactive, we do have to send out the information via mail. So it would be a situation where, the mail can take some time. They call it snail mail for a reason. But reaching out and saying, hey, I turned in all of this stuff. What else can I get on top of now before I get my missing information letter in the mail? A lot of times applications are processed within the first 10 days. The rest of that time is just waiting on families to return their missing information letters to complete the application. So you can speed up your process by reaching out to your caseworker or to your intake worker and asking what is needed, what may be missed, things along those lines, so that you can jump on that ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. And for families who have a school-age child, or right now they're not using before and after school care, but they are interested in summer camp, in what timeline should they apply for funding? Because if they're applying now and it's January and they don't need the funding until June, how does that work?
Yeah, so right now, because we don't have a waiting list, you can apply closer to the summer, maybe April, May-ish. If you have a start date for your summer camp, whether that's like maybe June 5th, and once you get through everything, you can say, okay, in a month in June 5th, I'm going to need childcare at the YWCA or whatever. Then they would be able to put that into the system. We'd be able to get the process rolling. On that note, you can use like you can apply for childcare for the summer and then put it in suspension for the school year. So if you don't need the before and after school care for your kiddo, you can just hold that during the school year, or vice versa. If you're a teacher and you know that you don't need the summer care, but you need the before and after school care, you can do that. The only thing we cannot do is drop-in care. So if your kiddo is only going in the summertime, but then come Christmas, when all those days are off school, you can't say, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna, I need to drop off my kiddo during the Christmas break. That would be considered drop-in care, and that would be something you would have to private pay for. We cannot pay for drop-in care. However, if you are before and after school care and the Christmas holidays do roll around, we would still then continue their care going forward, even on those days that they're off school.
Thanks. So again, just to clarify with all these terms for everyone on this call. So when you were talking about like now is the time to apply for summer camp, you were referencing to the actual providers like the Y or the J's or the, camp
Correct.
funds to get that child a spot, holding that spot in their program. And then in terms of the funding for the program, if it's a participating provider, they could either apply now and put that funding on suspend until the summer, or they could wait until April or May since there's no wait list and then apply and get the funding part rolled up before camp actually starts.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Someone else can,
if you want, you can also give us a call at any point and see if we have a waiting list or not. We can't always guarantee when we're going to run out of funds from the state. So, you can always call in and say, hey, I'm looking at summer care. What is your funding like at this point? Like, do you have a waiting list? That kind of thing.
Thank you. Someone else had a question about summer camp. When you say summer camps, is this the day providers or other places? So I think the question is it like childcare during the day or is it like sleepaway camp for a week?
It would be like child care centers. So like we were just saying, like the Ys, the J's, all of that. It wouldn't be the sleepaway or, the specialized camps. It would have to be a licensed provider.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions right now. So I'll just give a minute here if anyone else does have a question that they're thinking of to put that in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to close up here in just a minute. I do believe that I will be able to email out to all of you as participants the PowerPoint that Shelly shared, which has the eligibility list on there, how to search the Compass website for camps and childcare, what pieces of information you'll need to know to apply, as well as the contacts for all the other local ELRCs around the state. So if you're not in central Pennsylvania, like Hannah and I and Shelley are, there'll be contacts where you can, again, apply through the same method for your own area. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions come through. So thank you guys so much for attending. I'm sure for a couple minutes here, since we ended early, Hannah and Shelley would be comfortable staying on if you want to hang out and ask a question that you didn't want to raise to the group. But this was super helpful. And Hannah and Shelley, thank you guys so much for clarifying this and giving us all these resources to both agency caseworkers and to resource families. Really, really helpful as we seek to provide that care to kiddos.